but I didn't know a lot of what you just said, so I appreciate you sharing it all. So I actually have a follow-up question for you, and this kind of again parallels with like the movement to free our political prisoners, right? Because we know that their imprisonment is actually a crime, right? So
That's right.
I heard the brother Darubin bin Wahad. He was on Dr. Jared Ball's show. He was talking about Assata Shakur, and he made sure to point to the fact that the concept of innocence needs to be removed from the equation of her freedom. And what he meant by that is whether or not she was innocent or guilty as it relates to this country's laws has no bearing on the fact that she had a right to resist her oppression. And on that grounds, she should be freed as a political prisoner, right? So I want to pivot that question to reparations because, it's my belief, and you may disagree with me, but it's my belief that the discussions around the wealth gap are a red herring. So even if the wealth gap between Black people and white people were zero, they still owe us a debt. So I think that it's a distraction to say that there's this wealth gap and that's why we need reparations, when even if there wasn't a wealth gap, like reparations are still due to us for the injury. So I want you to speak on that. Do you think that the conversations around the wealth gap are a distraction? Or do you think that we should work to bifurcate between discussions of the wealth gap and discussions of reparations?
No, I don't think it's a distraction if it's the conversation is held within the context of full repair. I don't think it's a distraction. I think it minimizes what the process of repair, our end goal, which is the total repair of our people. It minimizes what it would take to get us to repair. Just having an equal wealth setting with whites in this country will not get us to repair. And it needs to be all those other things that I talked about have to be included in the conversation. So I don't think it's a distraction because, the wealth gap exists, and it exists because of, the crimes committed against our ancestors. But so does a lot of other things exist because of those crimes. But to try to center it only on the wealth gap minimizes the amount of injury that we suffer and minimizes the debt that these people owe. So I agree that discussion needs to be held in Chicago. We invited Professor Darity to Chicago at our Reparations Awareness Day event. We had over 200 people come out to that event, and we to hear him, what I call, give ammunition to those of us in the struggle. Just another bullet, if you will, but it's not the bomb in our arsenal, but another bullet in our arsenal to show that this wealth gap is a direct result of the crimes committed against our people, and that it demonstrates, and his research demonstrate that the only way you're going to bridge that gap is through reparations. So I think it's, and I characterize it as ammunition when Dr. Darity was here, but our weapons is the fact that all those crimes, all those actions that were committed were actual crimes against African humanity. That's the global weapon that African people are wielding all over the world, and the data that Professor Darity and others are producing is just the ammunition in that weapon, but it's certainly not the weapon itself.
Okay, Minister Ari, this next question is for you. So you can unmute yourself if you can hear me. But the question is, what does reparations work look like outside of a national election cycle? So take us beyond 2020, if you will, because a lot of this conversation right now is happening within a national election cycle. With people are talking to candidates who are making promises, but when it's not in the news, like what does the work at the grassroots level look like during those periods of time?
I think one of the key areas that the work should look like is that of slavery disclosure. The enforcement of slavery disclosure laws is one. In Philadelphia, we have a slavery disclosure law that requires, upon disclosure, financial institutions must submit a financial reparations plan. Pure and simple. It's been on the book since 2005. However, the enforcement aspect has been not dealt with, because even the politicians who sponsored the bill, they are still locked down by the financial institutions in the city. And so they don't go towards the enforcement. They got it on the books because of NCOBRA. That's what we did in 2005. But when we come to the enforcement piece, that's where we have to come at right now. Enforcement, getting the